The Nike line has the Move to Zero campaign, which is a plan to try and get as much recycling elements into their shoes as possible. And it appears in a couple of really major ways. One is grind rubber, usually on the outsole, and the other one is in the fly knit materials that they use on the upper to try and build in some of the fabrics there from recycled materials. And today we're kind of flipping this around a little bit, because basically what this shoe represents is that grind rubber, but instead of it being on the outsole, it's in the upper, a kind of crossover from those two standard elements of the grind rubber in the outsole and the fly knit upper. So we're going to be taking a look at that today, looking at the details on this shoe. One particular detail on this Kyrie 7 that I've never seen before on a Kyrie 7, and I would guess, just ballpark, that I've done 10 videos about Kyrie 7s, including these guys right here. This is the chip, the Kyrie 7 chip, which drops soon. I don't know if it's dropped yet. I'm shooting this video on July the 28th, I think it is today, and it'll probably go up on YouTube around about July 30th, something like that. And the chips are a grade school or a preschool or a toddler and an infant shoe, 3 different sizes, but they don't get anything above grade school, so we're not pushing into men's or adult sizes on that chip shoe. But it's the most recent one that we've done at the channel, and like I say, I've done a bunch of these Kyrie 7 videos, and today is the first time I've seen a particular detail, and it's about the swooshes. So we'll get into that in today's video. But that Move to Zero initiative is kind of important. A lot of different systems around the world are trying to move into a much more sustainable, ecological plan where they can have a smaller impact on the environment. And it's kind of, to be honest, it's kind of hard to ignore climate change right now. I'm out here in Tokyo, Japan. Been out here for 22 years shooting content for 3 of those years for you guys every single day up on YouTube about sneakers. And what I'm noticing is the Northern Hemisphere especially is pretty much flooded. Big floods in China, big floods in Europe, big floods in the UK, massive issues going on in the States with wildfires and stuff like that. And we had a huge landslide here in Japan that took out like half a town, made it into international news. So to me, it's kind of pretty hard to look at these actual events where you're seeing major changes in the weather and the climate, actually seeing it firsthand. You know, it's not just something that somebody's writing about in a report or theorizing about. So these Move to Zero ideas that you get with brands like Nike, also over at the Adidas line, they've got a future craft brand. They've got a shoe that you take for a year and then you send it back to Adidas and they grind it down and reconstitute it from exactly the same materials, nothing new added, and send it right back to you. So they have 100% recyclable shoe. So seeing all of these, you know, different initiatives and different plans from different brands and different companies to try and lessen their impact on the environment, it's a good thing. I know it's driven by money. I'm not too, naive to assume that they're doing it for the planet. What they're doing it is because there's money out there to be made, because people out there want to buy ecologically sound shoes, and that's why Nike and Adidas do these things. I don't think they're driven by a desire to sort of save the planet. They're happy that that's a byproduct of the profit they're making off of these Move to Zero shoes and recyclable shoes. But it's still a good thing. You know, it's a good thing that that's what's happening, and it's great to see that coming into this shoe and that Move to Zero initiative having an effect on these Kyrie 7s. So let's dive into the shoe and have a look at some of the details on it, and the important details really wrap around that Move to Zero grind rubber. And what grind rubber is basically, if you imagine, let's say you've got a sheet of rubber like this, and you cut out the shape of a shoe, like the outsole, for example. Normally they would discard the outside edge that they didn't use, but basically what they do is they grind that down, fire it back into the system, and then use that to create another outsole. So that's where the grind rubber is recycled materials and how ecological they are. And like I say, usually it's the outsole, but it's crazy to look at these guys today. I don't see the outsole on these guys as having grind rubber in there. That doesn't look like a grind rubber outsole to me at all. It's pretty much a solid grey outsole, lots of detailing in the tread and the design down there, but as far as materials and colours go, this doesn't look like grind rubber to me at all. Although in the middle of it you do have the Kevin Durant, the Kyrie Irving branding on the middle of these guys, and then towards the back a little hit of colour in that orange. But basically it's an all grey outsole, and basically what I'm putting my money on is that it is not grind rubber. Interesting, since that's the major detail of the shoe, is the grind rubber, and usually you would see that in the outsole. Where you do see it is in 3 places on the upper, and it's the third of those that I've never seen before, but we'll get into the other 2 first. So we'll start high up on the top of the tongues, and you can see the KI branding up there for Kyrie Irving, and this being his shoe and all, and you can see that it's got that kind of roughed up effect to it, and that's the grind rubber coming in there, the recycled materials at the top of the tongue, this kind of aqua blue. It's called the Copa, and I have no idea why. I couldn't find a reason why it's called the Copa. That chip that dropped recently for the younger things has the little character up there on the tongue called chip, so it makes sense to call that shoe chip. Copa, I don't really know what it is about it. Maybe it's the color, maybe it's meant to represent something kind of Hawaii. If you think of the LeBron 8s, I think they were, and they have a Miami feel to them, and that kind of light, kind of aqua blue maybe represents that, and that's where Copa comes into it. I don't know. But anyway, that detail at the top of the tongue, that's where your grind rubber comes in on the branding up there. And then if you move down from that, you get these big old eyelets at the bottom of the lacing system on Kyrie 7s, both on the medial and on the lateral side. There's 2 of them right at the bottom of the lacing systems coming out of each side to make 4. And if you zoom in on those guys and look closely, just like that branding at the top of the tongue, you can see here you've got that grind rubber at play again to represent that recyclable element of the shoe. But I said there were 3 things that have the grind rubber in, and the third one is the one that I've never seen before. And what we're talking about is the swooshes. So let's go have a look at the lateral side of the swoosh. Zoom in on there, and you'll see it's almost like a piping effect. It's not a solid swoosh like you'd have it, say, in Air Force One, a solid panel of leather to create the swoosh effect. What it is an outline, again done in this grind rubber, and that's very standard on the lateral side of Kyrie 7. Sometimes they do some really wicked swooshes like flames, for example. I know the Chinese New Year's also had a really intricate swoosh on the lateral side. And the interesting detail is that usually, and this is the thing I've never seen before, usually on the medial side it has a different swoosh that's not so 3-dimensional, much more sort of 2-dimensional, and it's just sort of like written onto the upper, as opposed to the piping effect you get on the lateral side, but not on today's shoe. If we go over and have a look at the medial side on today's shoe, you can see it's almost identical. That swoosh on there is almost identical to the lateral side swoosh, and that's something I've never seen before on Kyrie 7s. I've never seen them have the identical swoosh left and right side, the lateral, medial side. Usually the lateral is 3D piping style, and the medial is 2D sort of printed style. So that's a kind of neat little detail on there. And since we're over at the medial side, we might as well also look at the big sort of area of canvas, the big kind of chunk of real estate that makes up the back end of the shoe, because if they don't get the color on this right, it looks massively chunky, but they've done a pretty good job of having it slightly lighter than the color of the upper, so that it has its own sort of distinct area of the shoe, but not so wild that it's like this massive chunky piece of fabric on the medial side. So if you look at that ankle and heel sort of area towards the back of the shoe on the medial side, you can see that big sort of blank area of a light aqua blue, but it still fits the narrative of the shoe. Now, forward or back, I think I'm going to nip to the front first, just have a quick look at the bottom of the lacing system, since we've already talked about those eyelets. It's standard on Kyrie 7s to have at the very bottom of the lacing system a tiny little all-seeing eye to represent Egypt and Egyptian culture and Egyptian history, which is a very common thread through many Kyrie shoes, not just the 7s. So we see that at the bottom of the lacing system, and then around to the back of the shoe, a neat little detail is a big chunk of sail all across the back end of this guy, and right in the middle of that, the signature of Kyrie Irving's kind of neat little detail. Now, to me, these heels are a bit stripped back compared to what I've seen in other Kyrie 7s. I think I've seen a lot more, especially down low where the heel meets the midsole, a lot more structure and a lot more design going on there in other Kyrie 7s. So these feel a bit stripped back. I don't know if that's just a feeling or if it's an actual design element of the shoe, but to me, that's what these guys are talking about at the back, is something a little bit simpler, a little bit less in your face, a little bit less overt, but that's cool because it fits in with the rest of the shoe. I guess the last thing to really do is to go back towards the toe end of these guys and have a look at the only real distinct piece of black on here, and we're talking about those shark's teeth along the lateral side. And the main reason why I want to look at them is because, again, I don't see the grind rubber at play here, and this would be a great place to do that, to have that grind rubber, that's recycled rubber if you're going to do that. So it's an odd little shoe. If we come back out and have a look at the whole shoe. It's an odd little shoe for that move to zero grind rubber campaign, because like I said at the top of the video, usually that's what you'd see on the outsole. That's where the grind rubber would come into play, and then on the upper half of the shoe, if you want to go with recycled, it would be flying it. But it's, as I've explained in this video, the outsole and the midsole section of the shoe doesn't seem to be made of those recyclable grind rubber materials, but instead in the upper, which is very unusual, you see those grind rubbers in the swoosh, in the tongue branding, and also in the third place. What was the third place? The swoosh, the tongue branding, and it was the rubber at the bottom of the lacing system in the eyelets. So with that being said, it's time to wrap this one up, finishing another video for you guys. Just a reminder out there, I don't know if I mentioned this, I think I did, last day in August is going to be the 1000th consecutive day on YouTube for me without a single day miss, so that's something to look out for. And about how many days? Is it 3? No, it's 13 days before that I'll have my second vaccination shot, so another thing to look forward to. For now though, it's time just to wrap this one up. Thank you guys for checking out the content, and I'll do the same thing that I do at the end of every single video, which is remind you that I do this every single day, and that means that you are guaranteed to see me tomorrow.